Hello, welcome back to my blog. This is Jobran. So welcome to my channel. My channel discusses a lot of things. So this is for educational purposes only. So if you are interested to get to know more about my discussion, so please hit like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for all my subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting me, for sending your likes, your comments. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much for that. So for this video is I'll be discussing, or I'll be continuing the discussion we had last time. So we discussed about the concept of our first psychologist, an Austrian neurologist in the name of Sigmund Freud. So we talked about him, we discussed about him, his idea, his some examples of defense mechanism that we humans use from day to day. We also discussed the stages of psychosexual development and the id and the ego, the interaction of the id and the ego. So I hope you are learning from that previous video. So today is I'll be continuing the discussion of the psychological view of the self. For me, this is very important for us to get to know more because our mental health is also played a very big impact to our personality and our behavior. So number two, psychologist that we are going to discuss is Carl Jung. So Carl Jung, if you are familiar with him, he was a Swiss psychologist and a psychiatrist, and he is the founder of analytical psychology and a student of Sigmund Freud. So again, he is a student of Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud is the father of psychoanalysis. So Carl Jung, he's the founder of analytical psychology. So Jung believed that since the beginning of time and through the repetitive experiences of our ancestors, all our experiences, these experiences have formed archetypes. So he is more focused on the archetypes, the things that you learn from our ancestors, from your great great grandfather, and it embedded in your personality. So what is archetype? So archetypes are defined as ancient images that derive from the collective unconscious, meaning the learnings that we got from our forefathers, ancestors, parents, we have that, and that becomes our collective unconscious, and it becomes part of our archetypes. So these images cause to react sensitively to symbols of nativity, dying, good figures, mother and father figures, figures of the opposite sex, and so on. So we experience a lot of things in life, and those experiences becomes part of us, and that becomes our archetypes. So for me, this is very important to get to know the experiences that we had from our ancestors, from our forefathers. So archetypes express themselves mainly through dreams, some are through fantasies and delusions. So each archetype is believed by Jung to have its own life and personality. Some of it is still vague, and only few have been established. For me, I learned a lot of things from my grandfather, grandmother. So I observed that. And part of me, I also have that archetypes within me. So I established that within myself, and possibly it also affect to who am I today. So those are very important matters that we need to consider in trying to understand our psychological view, how we view things, how we appreciate things, and those are very important. So there are four major Jungian archetypes. So according to Carl Jung, we have the four major Jungian archetypes. We have the persona. So as human as we have our own persona. What is persona? So persona is this is the mask that you use to present yourself to the world. So the persona is the mask that you use to present yourself to the world. For example, this is how I present myself to the world. So this is my persona. I don't know about you, how you present yourself to the world. It depends on you. It depends on your archetypes. How do you show yourself to the world? And number two archetypes is the shadow. we also have our shadow. So, according to Carl Jung, the shadow is the darker side of you. I have my own shadow, the darker side of me. So, this consists of our sex, our life instinct. So, this consists the darker side of you. This consists of how you view yourself, your life is instinct. So we are wearing our mask, our the persona that you show to the world, and we also wear our shadow, the darker side of you. So possibly if I'm going to relate this, maybe the bad side of you, the darker side, the not so good trait in you. So I think we have that, but it depends on the situation, no? So for example, me, I am good when the person is good to me. But if you don't treat me well, so if you are bad to me, so possibly my shadow, it will show. So I don't know if you believe that concept, but for me, I also have the darker side. But I try to limit that. I try to control the darker side of me. So number three, according to Carl Jung, is we also have the anema or animus. So the anema and animus are the masculinity and the femininity aspect of the person. The anema is the anima and the animus are the masculine and feminine aspect of personality that all people have. Number four is the self. So the self, this is myself, symbolizes my soul or the psyche, right? This is myself that symbolizes my soul or the psyche. So for Jung, self-realization is the process of attaining selfhood. If you learn how to do self-realization, if you learn to realize a lot of things, that is the process of attaining your selfhood, the person that you are today. That's why when we do something bad, when we hurt the feelings of others, we need to reflect ourselves. We need to do self realization because that is part of being you, being human, being yourself. So, selfhood means enabling all the psychological components to work in unity and harmony. So people who have achieved this state have been able to acquire a balance between and among the archetypes. So we experience a lot of things, a lot of frustrations, the darker side of us. Sometimes we get mad, sometimes we are happy. We have our masculinity, femininity. We also have our soul. We need to do self-realization because that is the only way to get to know ourselves better, to balance ourselves between and among others. Because every day you are dealing with a lot of people, you are dealing with a lot of things, and that's the best way for you to attain your own personality, to attain your selfhood. The number three psychologist is Erik Erikson. So if you can still remember him, he discusses about that in every stage of life, we experience a lot of crisis, difficulties, struggles, and that is part of life. That's according to Erik Erikson. He also portrayed the idea of identity crisis. So he's more focused on the concept of psychosocial development theory. So Erikson was a German American developmental psychologist and psychoanalyst. He was a professor at Harvard, University of California, and is famous for his psychosocial development theory and has been recognized for creating the phrase identity crisis. So I think he's the person who discusses more about identity crisis. We experience identity crisis. So that's part of the psychosocial development theory of Erik Erikson. So Erik Erikson's psychosocial developmental theory claims that self-identity progresses in 8 stages, each facing a specific psychosocial dilemma or crisis throughout the lifetime. So according to him, in every stages of life, there is an interaction of conflict. So there is conflict. In every stages of your life, you experience conflict, and that is normal. That is part of Erik Erikson's psychosocial development theory. For example, me, I'm also encountering conflict within me, within myself. So we have this one, the harmonious element and the disruptive element. So according to Erik Erikson, we have two types of elements, the harmonious or the syntonic element and the disruptive, which is the dystonic element. We have the harmonious element within ourselves and the disruptive element. So, moreover, Erikson emphasized the point that in order to have a balanced output, each stage should experience not only one element but both conflicting elements. In order for you not to experience identity crisis or conflict within yourself, is you need to learn to balance between the harmonious element or the syntonic element and a disruptive element, which is the dystonic element. So you cannot just focus on your harmonious element or the systonic element. You also need to focus on both the harmonious and the conflicting element or the disruptive element to understand yourself better. So that's the idea of Erik Erikson. The best way to understand yourself is to embrace your syntonic element and dystonic element. To embrace everything in you. Embrace your imperfections, embrace all your struggles, embrace the conflict that you have within yourself. So let's discuss about the psychosocial developmental theory of Erik Erikson. Number one psychosocial is the trust versus mistrust. So during infancy, this is infancy up to 24 months. So a child may develop trust versus mistrust. So the question is, can this world be trusted? So if you have an infant, you need to develop the trust uh, versus mistrust, psychosocial developmental theory. So if you establish trust to a child, it will give the child hope, right? So when there is hope, so a baby may develop trust and confidence in dealing with other people. However, if you don't develop trust, there is mistrust. The problem is a baby develop trust issues. So that's very important to know because from infancy up to 12 to 24 months, it's 2 years. You need to develop the concept of trust versus mistrust because it can affect the personality of a child if you don't develop that. So we should give them hope that this world can be trusted. If not, the child may develop trust issues. So number two developmental theory is the autonomy versus shame and doubt. So this is 2 to 4 years. So the question for this stage is, can I do this on my own or do I need help? So the good thing in this stage is that child will develop the will, the will to survive or the will to do everything. So if the child develop that will, the child may feel a sense of control over the destiny. So whatever happens to the child still pursue his or her dreams. The child will not easily give up. The child has this will to do everything she can. However, if you don't develop that autonomy versus shame and doubt, the child may engage in self-doubt to his abilities and potential. Meaning the child will develop a lot of questioning if he can do it or not. So he loses that confidence within himself. So more questioning, that's why he easily give up because he doesn't trust himself. He doubted himself. So that's the second one. So the third one is initiative versus guilt. This is 4 to 5 years. So the question is, am I doing good? So the question is, am I doing good? So basic strengths, so if you are going to give this initiative versus guilt, so the child may develop his purpose in life. So if you do this, a child may develop a growth mindset. So if you teach a child to believe in himself, to do his own initiative at a very young age, a child may develop a growth mindset. So the child wants to grow, to develop, to excel, to exceed. So That's the positive outcome if you have this initiative. However, if the child is having a hard time to trust in himself, or there is guilt, so a child becomes dependent on performing tasks. So if you're not able to train a child to do initiative, to take his own, to develop a growth mindset, so the child may becomes overly dependent on performing such tasks and performing any task. That is the important thing of initiative versus guilt. If you give initiative, if you teach them how to use their initiative, the child may develop a growth mindset. But if you didn't, the child may develop guilt and the child becomes dependent on performing tasks. He doesn't want to excel. He is scared to excel. So that's the negative thing that will happen to a child if this was not properly uh, taught by the parents. Okay. So the fourth one is we have the industry versus inferiority. So this is 5 to 12 years old. So this is the question is, how am I going to be good? So how am I going to be good? So if you give this industry, if you are if you taught your child to develop this industry thing, the child may develop competence, that he is capable to do things, that he is good at doing things. That is competence. So the child will develop achievement, leads to feelings of competence. However, if you didn't give that industry, the child may develop inferiority. Failures lead to feelings of inferiority. So if you are not developing a child to to achieve something better for himself, he will develop that sense of inferiority, that he is not doing good, he is not good enough. That's the fourth one, industry versus inferiority. Number five is identity versus role confusion. So this is 12 to 9 years old. The question is, how am I? So if you are good at teaching your child to know himself or herself, the identity, so the child may develop fidelity. It tends to develop a strong sense of self. He knows himself. She knows better than any other people. He accepts himself. So it develop a strong sense of self. However, if you don't give that identity to a child may develop role confusion. The child may experience, or the teen may experience an identity crisis and other personal identity issues. So that's the negative thing of, if you are not developing a child to accept or to get to know himself or herself, and that leads to role confusion. Number six is intimacy versus isolation. So this is 20 to 40 years old, like me. So I fall on this in this stage. So the question is, can I loved and be loved? So this is more about love. Diba? So if you're successful with this stage, intimacy, a person may form loving and lasting relationship with others. So it's easy for us to love. It's easy for us to build relationship because our intimacy is um, fully developed. However, if it is not fully developed, so the unsuccessful outcome, the adult may lack of desire to establish meaningful connection, lack of opportunity to develop fulfilling relationships. So the person will not establish a lasting relationship because there's still a lot of things to develop. So that's the idea. So can I loved and be loved? Is it okay to love the person or not? So if you are good at this, intimacy versus isolation, intimacy, it's easy for you to develop a long lasting relationship. But isolation, you prefer to be alone because it is hard for you to develop meaningful and lasting relationship. So number 7 is generativity versus stagnation. This is from the ages of 40 to 65 years. Okay, so going senior citizen. So this is for our parents now. So this is the stage for our parents. So the question is, have I made a difference to the world? So they're trying to ask them if they are doing good things in life, if they have made difference to the world. So if they develop it, they establish the feeling of care. And if they are good at this stage, a person may feel sense of accomplishment. They are happy with their lives, they are successful, they are contented. So the person may feel a sense of accomplishment. However, if the person is not developing this generativity, they may feel stagnant. A person may feel a sense of worthlessness. So they are not happy with what they've become. There are a lot of regrets. They feel they are worthless. So that's the stage wherein they try to ask themselves if they made a difference to the world. So number 8 is integrity versus despair. So this is 65 years old to death. Did I have, the question is, did I have wonderful life? So the basic strength for this is wisdom. So if the person is good at this integrity, if the person at is good at this stage, a person may feel a sense of success and accomplishment in the way they have lived their life. However, if they are not successful or if they are not successful and accomplished, a person may feel unsatisfied with the way they have lived their lives. So again, this is all about integrity versus despair. So if you are able to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish, there is no unfinished business. So therefore, you will lived, you are happy in the way that you lived your life. But if you have a lot of regrets, a lot of unsatisfied accomplishment, unfinished business, then you will experience despair. So those are the stages that we encounter every day. Nobody is exempted from infancy up to death. So at each stage of psychosocial development, the ego should include most of the positive or the harmonious attitude, but it should also contain some of the negative or disruptive attitude. Again, Erik Erikson wants us to embrace our harmonious element and the disruptive element because according to him, that's the best way for us to embrace or attain our selfhood. So only then the problem can be regarded resolved properly if only we know how to embrace our syntonic and dystonic element. So Erikson viewed human nature as capable of achieving basic strength, resolving conflict in a positive way, and taking control of our own development. Again, we are encountering conflict every day, but Erik Erikson wants us to resolve that in a more positive way and taking control of our own development. So Erik Erikson wants us to develop ourselves better by accepting everything that we have as a person. So he believed that heredity plays only a minor in shaping an individual personality, and that is more likely to be influenced by learning and social interaction. So Erik Erikson doesn't believe that the person you are today is influenced by our forefathers, ancestors, genes. He also believed that the way you are today is most likely influenced by learning and social interactions. So Erik Erikson also believed that the psychosocial development theory works in chronological order and is applicable to different cultures. So regardless of your culture, you experience a lot of those stages, a lot of conflict. So We all follow that chronological order, the stages of psychosocial development theory. So, knowing this may help yourself and others in understanding the self in accordance with what stage you are in. So, that's the concept of Erik Erikson. The last psychologist is Carl Roger. So, Carl Roger is more about self theory. So Carl Roger was an influential American humanistic psychologist. He is one of the founding fathers of psychotherapy. So psychotherapy meaning he believed um, that the self is divided into two categories. We have the real self and the ideal self. What is the real self? So the real self, this is your true self. This is who and what we really are. This self may be an imperfect one, but certainly it is the most real part. So we are imperfect, but according to Carl Roger, the kind of person you are, you may be imperfect, but you are the real one. Okay, this is me. This is the real me. I may not be perfect. I am imperfect, but this is the real me. So that is the real self. And number two is the ideal self. So Carl Roger discusses that this is the self we wish to be. We strive hard. We do things We do things a lot, we strive to be, and what we feel we are expected to be. We tend to accommodate others' expectations because we believe that we will be more liked and loved if we do. That is our ideal self. That is our being idealistic. I want to be this kind of person. I want to get rich. I want to buy that. I want to do this. That is our ideal self. But the kind of person you are today, that is your real self. So Rogers pointed out that for us to have an accurate self concept, there should be a resemblance between the ideal and the real self. There should be resemblance, meaning there should be connection between the kind of person you are and the kind of person you wish to be. There should be a resemblance. So conversely, if there is a big difference between the ideal self and the real self, personality problems may occur. So if there is a conflict between the kind of person you are and the kind of person you wish to be, personality problems occur. So make sure that the kind of person you are is a resemblance of the kind of person you wish to be. Do you get me? For example, this is me, but I want to become my ultimate dream. I want to become a psychologist someday. By resemblance, should there be a resemblance of the kind of person I am today to achieve that? So if you're going to ask me, possibly I will say yes, because I love to talk, I love people, I love to deal with people, I love to listen to people. So possibly that is my personality. And if I aim to become something like that, so possibly it will happen because this is my personality as a kind of person. Possibly that will happen. So when there is discrepancy between the real self and the ideal self, this can lead us to feel low, to feel stressed and anxious because we feel that our real self seems not to be sufficient, while the ideal self seems impossible to reach. That's why there should be a resemblance because if there is a huge difference between the real self and the ideal self, meaning we experience stress, anxiety, questioning because we thought that the kind of person we are today seems to be not enough to achieve the kind of person we wish to be. Our ideal self is impossible to reach. So that's very important to get to know that. So Rogers contended that self-concept is composed of three elements. We have the self-image, the self-esteem, and the ideal self. So what is self-image? Your self-image is how you see yourself based on your strength and weaknesses. How you think and feel about your appearance, your task performance, and your social relationship consistently affect your self-image. Self-image talks about your appearance, your social relationship, how you performed, your strength and weaknesses. That's your self-image. Your self-esteem. Your self-esteem refers to the positive and negative feelings you have about yourself. Self-esteem, the positive and negative feelings you have about yourself. So when you feel that you are good, then your self-esteem is high. When you feel bad, your self-esteem is low. But how overly high self-esteem, however, can have a negative effect. So overly high self-esteem. Possible links to high self-esteem are bullying, increased social comparison, and prejudice or racism. So there should be a balance of your self-esteem. Self-esteem is good. Get to know your negative and positive feelings about yourself. If you have high self-esteem, that is good because if you feel good about yourself, you will get higher self-esteem. But if you feel bad about yourself, you will get low self-esteem. But overly high self-esteem, it can lead you to a lot of negative things like bullying. You will do a lot of increased social comparison and prejudice or racism. However, when you feel that you are failure and unworthy, when you experience failure and you feel that you are unworthy, you will experience low self esteem. So, low self esteem has its own downside. It has been linked to psychological suffering, including anxiety, depression, and suicide. So, if you have very low self esteem, it is not good also. It has downside. It can affect your psychological inputs, like you will have psychological suffering, you will feel anxious, depression, and suicide. The last is the ideal self. So, ideal self is based on one's hope and wishes, based on how a person would like to become. So, if there's a big difference or a big gap between how you see yourself and what you would like to become, it will somehow affect how you value yourself. So, again, the ideal self, the things that we wish to become. But if there is a big gap between the how you see yourself and how you would like to become, it will affect how you give value to yourself. So self-esteem is good. It helps us to number one, identify our own strength. That is good. Number two, distinguish between our inner beauty and outer beauty. And number three, focus on the good rather than the bad. The fourth one is understand more about what makes good friendship. And the last is create a habit of positive realism. So again, we experience a lot of struggles. Self-esteem is good, but overly high self-esteem may also cause a lot of negative impression about you. But overly low self-esteem also can cause a lot of stresses, suffering, depression. So there should be in between a balance between this. So hope you are learning today. So we discussed the four psychologists discussing the psychological view of the self, and these are Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Carl Rogers, and Erik Erikson. So hope you was able to grasp the learning that you had today, and hopefully it helps you learn the value of their concept, the interaction, the conflict that we have within ourselves, how to address that, how to develop our self-esteem, uh, how to be aware of the things that we are doing not to affect it to ourselves, and also to accept our imperfections, to accept our struggles, to accept crisis in life, because psychologists would say it's part of how we develop as a person. So I hope you are learning today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will still watch all my videos, subscribe, like, share, and so that we can reach a lot of audience. Thank you so much, and God bless you.